The distress signal. Captain Hawkins receives the call. The alien council shrieked in horror as they watched the screens displaying the devastation wrought by the Galactic Empire. The once thriving planet of Zoreth lay in ruins, its cities reduced to rubble, and its people either dead or enslaved. The Galactic Empire ruled billions of worlds with an iron fist for millennia, crushing countless rebellions in a tide of alien blood. The various species had long resigned themselves to eternal servitude, but the humans were different. Scattered across the far reaches of the Empire, enslaved humans toiled under the cruel yoke of their alien overlords, seething with rage and secretly plotting their liberation. The comm console on the ESS Endeavor's bridge beeped urgently, drawing Captain James Hawkins' attention away from the star charts he had been studying. He tapped the flashing red light, and a distorted holographic image of a planet sprang to life above the console. Investigating the source. "What do you make of this, Lieutenant?" Hawkins asked, gesturing for his second-in-command to take a closer look. Lieutenant Alana Chen leaned in, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the data streaming alongside the planet's image. "It appears to be a distress signal, sir, originating from a remote world on the fringes of known space." Hawkins nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Set a course. If there's trouble, we have a duty to investigate and offer assistance." The Endeavor dropped out of hyperspace hours later, the mysterious planet looming large in the view screen. Scans revealed a once thriving civilization reduced to ruins, with no signs of life save for the faint energy signature of the distress beacon. Meeting Zorg, Hawkins assembled a landing party consisting of himself, Lieutenant Chen, and a squad of Earth Space Fleet Marines. As the shuttle touched down amidst the rubble of what had once been a sprawling city, an eerie sight greeted them. They picked their way through the debris, weapons at the ready, until a sudden movement caught Hawkins' eye. A lone figure emerged from the shadows of a collapsed building, its tattered robes billowing in the wind. "Don't shoot," the alien croaked, raising its 4 spindly arms in surrender. "Please, I mean you no harm." Hawkins lowered his rifle and stepped forward. "I'm Captain James Hawkins of the Earth Space Fleet. We received your distress call. What happened here?" The alien, who introduced himself as Zorg, recounted a tale of horror and oppression. The Galactic Empire, led by the vicious Emperor Zaron, had been systematically invading and enslaving planets across the galaxy. Learning the horrors of the Empire, they came without warning. Zorg said, his voice trembling. "Our defenses were no match for their superior technology. They slaughtered our warriors and took the survivors as slaves." Tears streamed down Zorg's wrinkled face as he pleaded with Hawkins. "Please, you must help us. The Empire's tyranny knows no bounds. If they are not stopped, countless more worlds will suffer our fate." Hawkins listened intently, a fire burning in his eyes. He had heard whispers of the Galactic Empire's cruelty, but had never witnessed its brutality firsthand. "We'll do whatever we can," he promised Zorg. "But you have to understand, Earth's military might is nothing compared to the Empire's. It won't be easy." Zorg nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I have faith in you, Captain. You and your people are our last hope." Planning the resistance, as the landing party returned to the Endeavor, Hawkins' mind raced with the enormity of the task before them. He knew they couldn't take on the Empire alone, but perhaps they could find other subjugated races willing to join their cause. "Lieutenant Chen, I want you to start gathering intel on the Empire's weaknesses," he ordered as they stepped onto the bridge. "We need to know everything we can about their tactics, their technology, and their chain of command." "Aye, sir," Chen replied, already typing furiously on her console. Hawkins gazed out at the stars streaking past the view screen as the Endeavor set off on its new mission. The road ahead would be long and perilous, but he knew in his heart that he couldn't turn his back on those suffering under the Empire's oppression. For better or worse, the fate of the galaxy now rested on the shoulders of Earth and her brave defenders. The infiltration. Preparing for the mission. The Endeavor slipped through the inky void of space, her hull barely illuminated by the distant stars. Captain Hawkins stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of their target, an Imperial outpost on the planet Zachos 7. Intel suggested that this facility housed a wealth of information on the Empire's military structure and key strategic locations. "All right, listen up," Hawkins said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We're going in hard and fast. Lieutenant Chen, you'll lead the infiltration team. Get in, grab the data, and get out. We'll provide cover fire from the Endeavor." Chen nodded, her face set with determination. "Aye, sir. We won't let you down." As the Endeavor descended into Zachos 7's atmosphere, the infiltration team prepared for the drop. Chen checked her weapons one last time, the weight of the mission heavy on her shoulders. She knew that the success of their rebellion hinged on the information they were about to steal. The infiltration begins. The dropship hurtled towards the planet's surface, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to Imperial scanners. As they approached the outpost, Chen could see the towering walls and gleaming turrets that protected the facility. 30 seconds to drop," the pilot announced, his voice crackling over the intercom. Chen and her team moved into position, their hearts pounding in their chests. The dropship shuddered as it entered the outpost's airspace, and then the doors snapped open. "Go, go, go," Chen yelled, leaping from the ship. They hit the ground running, their boots pounding against the steel walkways of the outpost. Alarms blared as the Imperial guards realized they were under attack, but Chen and her team were already moving, their weapons spitting plasma bolts at the enemy. Securing the data, they fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the outpost, the air thick with the stench of burnt flesh and ozone. Chen could feel her muscles burning with exertion, but she pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that every second counted. Finally, they reached the outpost's central data core. Chen jammed a data spike into the main terminal, her fingers flying across the keypad as she worked to bypass the security protocols. Come on," she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. The data spike beeped, and then a flood of information began pouring onto Chen's handheld device. Her eyes widened as she scanned the data, realizing the true scope of what they had uncovered. A critical discovery. "Captain, you're not going to believe this," she said over the comlink. "The Empire's power is concentrated on Thrax Prime. That's where the Emperor lives, in some kind of impenetrable fortress." Hawkins cursed under his breath. "A direct assault would be suicide. We need to find another way to weaken their grip on the galaxy." Chen scrolled through the data, her heart racing. "Wait a minute, there's something here about a rebel faction within the Empire, led by someone called the Shadow." "The Shadow," Hawkins repeated, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Can we make contact with them?" "I'm not sure," Chen admitted, "but if we could form an alliance, it could turn the tide of this war." Escaping the outpost, their conversation was cut short by the sound of boots pounding towards their position. Chen yanked the data spike from the terminal, her weapon already in hand. "Time to go," she yelled to her team. They fought their way back out of the outpost, the stolen data secure in Chen's device. As they leaped onto the waiting dropship, Chen could see Imperial reinforcements pouring into the facility. "Punch it," she yelled to the pilot, and the dropship rocketed away from the outpost, the Endeavor covering their escape with a barrage of plasma fire. As they docked with the Endeavor, Hawkins was waiting for them in the hangar bay. Chen handed him the data device, a triumphant grin on her face. "Mission accomplished, sir," she said. Hawkins nodded, his eyes already scanning the data. "Well done, Lieutenant. This is the break we've been looking for." The Emperor's wrath. On Thrax Prime, Emperor Zarin sat upon his throne, his eyes narrowed as he listened to the report from his military advisors. "The humans have struck again, my lord," one of them said, his voice trembling. "They infiltrated our outpost on Zachos 7 and stole sensitive data." Zarin's clawed hand tightened around the arm of his throne, his eyes blazing with fury. "I want them found," he growled. "I want them hunted down and brought before me. The Earth scum will learn the price of defying the Galactic Empire." His advisors bowed and scurried from the throne room, leaving Zarin alone with his thoughts. The humans had proven to be a far greater thorn in his side than he had anticipated. He had underestimated their resolve, their tenacity, but no more. The full might of the Empire would be brought to bear upon them until their worlds lay in ashes and their people were enslaved. The galaxy would tremble before the power of Emperor Zarin. Striking back, targeting the supply depot, the Endeavor sliced through the void, her engines thrumming with power as she approached the first target on Hawkins' list, a vital Imperial supply depot on the planet Zephyrus. The depot was heavily guarded, with a network of sensor arrays and defense turrets that could easily detect and destroy any incoming threat. But Hawkins had a plan. "All right, folks, listen up," he said, his voice echoing through the ship's intercom. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. Lieutenant Chen, you'll lead a small team to infiltrate the depot and plant explosive charges on their main power generator. Once it blows, their defenses will be crippled, and we can swoop in to mop up the rest." Chen grinned, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Aye, sir. We'll make sure the depot goes up in flames." Infiltration and sabotage. As the Endeavor dropped out of hyperspace, the planet Zephyrus loomed before them, its surface a mottled green and brown. Chen and her team loaded into a small, stealthy shuttle and rocketed towards the surface, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They landed in a dense jungle a few clicks from the depot, the shuttle's cloaking device rendering it invisible to prying eyes. Chen and her team moved silently through the undergrowth, their weapons at the ready. As they approached the depot's perimeter, Chen spotted a small gap in the sensor net. She motioned for her team to follow, and they slipped through the opening, their boots barely making a sound on the damp earth. Once inside, they moved quickly, planting charges on the power generator and any other vital systems they could find. The Imperial guards were caught completely off guard, their attention focused on the skies above rather than the shadows within. Escape and explosion. Just as Chen and her team were about to make their escape, alarms began to blare throughout the depot. They had been detected. "Go, go, go," Chen yelled, urging her team towards the extraction point. Blasts of fire erupted around them as Imperial troops poured out of the buildings, their weapons spitting deadly bolts of energy. Chen and her team fought their way through the chaos, their own weapons flashing in the dim light. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the depot, sending flames and debris high into the air. The power generator had been destroyed, and with it, the depot's defenses. The Endeavor swooped in, her cannons blazing as she laid waste to the remaining Imperial forces. Chen and her team raced aboard the waiting shuttle, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. As they rocketed back towards the Endeavor, Chen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had struck a blow against the Empire, and with each passing day, their resistance grew stronger. A series of victories. Over the next few weeks, Hawkins and his crew hit target after target, their raids growing bolder and more daring with each passing day. They liberated a shipyard on the planet Volantis, stealing a squadron of Imperial fighters and using them to attack their own supply lines. They infiltrated a research facility on the moon of Nexus, destroying a prototype weapon that could have spelled doom for the Resistance. With each victory, more and more people flocked to their cause. Oppressed species that had long since given up hope now saw a chance for freedom, and they rallied behind the Earth Space Fleet and their human allies. But their greatest challenge was yet to come. The Battle of Arcadia. On the planet Arcadia, a group of rebels had been fighting a losing battle against the Empire for months. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they refused to surrender, fighting tooth and nail for every inch of ground. Hawkins knew that if the rebels fell, it would be a devastating blow to the Resistance. He ordered the Endeavor to set course for Arcadia, determined to lend whatever aid they could. As they approached the planet, they picked up a distress signal from the rebel base. They were under heavy attack, their defenses crumbling under the onslaught of Imperial forces. Hawkins didn't hesitate. He ordered the Endeavor to engage the Imperial ships, drawing their fire away from the rebel base. At the same time, he led a ground team to reinforce the rebel defenses, his rifle blazing as he charged into battle. Meeting the Shadow Resistance. The fighting was intense, with both sides taking heavy losses. But with the Earth Space Fleet's help, the rebels were able to hold the line, pushing the Imperial forces back inch by bloody inch. In the chaos of the battle, Hawkins found himself fighting side by side with a hooded figure wielding a glowing blue blade. The figure moved with incredible speed and grace, cutting down Imperial soldiers left and right. As the battle died down, the figure lowered his hood, revealing a scared, weathered face. "You must be Captain Hawkins," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "I am Zane, leader of the Shadow Resistance. I've been watching you and your crew for some time now." Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "The Shadow? I thought you were just a myth." Zane chuckled. "I assure you, I am very real. And I believe we have much to discuss." Over the next few hours, Zane and Hawkins talked strategy, sharing intelligence and resources. Zane had been a high-ranking general in the Empire before defecting, sickened by the atrocities he had witnessed. "Zeron is a monster," Zane said, his eyes hard. "He takes pleasure in the suffering of others. I couldn't stand by and watch any longer." Hawkins nodded. "We've seen the same thing. That's why we're here, to put an end to his tyranny once and for all." Zane smiled. "And with your help, we may just have a chance." The Empire strikes back. Coordinated attacks. Together, the Earth Space Fleet and the Shadow Resistance launched a series of coordinated attacks across the galaxy, striking at key Imperial targets and freeing countless worlds from Zeron's grip. For a time, it seemed as though victory was within reach, but the Empire was far from defeated. Zeron, enraged by the Resistance's successes, unleashed the full might of his armies upon them. Imperial ships poured into rebel-held systems, bombarding planets and slaughtering civilians without mercy. The Endeavor and her allies fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. They were forced to retreat, fleeing to the farthest reaches of the galaxy to regroup and plan their next move. Despair and determination. As they huddled in the bowels of a hidden rebel base, Hawkins couldn't help but feel a sense of despair wash over him. They had come so far, but the Empire's power seemed insurmountable. Zane placed a hand on Hawkins' shoulder, his eyes filled with determination. "We can't give up now," he said. "We've come too far to turn back. We'll find a way to defeat Zeron, no matter the cost." Hawkins nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We'll keep fighting for as long as it takes. The Empire may have the advantage now, but we have something they'll never have: the courage and tenacity of the human spirit. And that's something they can never defeat." A new mission. The Endeavor's bridge was a flurry of activity as Captain Hawkins and Zane pored over the latest intelligence reports. The war against the Empire had reached a critical juncture, and they knew that their next move could be the difference between victory and annihilation. "There's a mention here of an ancient alien artifact," Zane said, his brow furrowed as he studied the datapad in his hand. "It's said to possess the power to destroy entire star systems." Hawkins leaned in, his eyes widening. "Where is it?" "On a remote planet called Zephyrus Prime. It's a harsh, unforgiving world, but if the reports are true, it could be the key to bringing down Zeron once and for all." Hawkins nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Then that's where we're going. Assemble a team, Zane. We leave at dawn." The search for the artifact. As the Endeavor rocketed through hyperspace towards Zephyrus Prime, Hawkins couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He knew that they were walking into a trap, but what choice did they have? The Empire's grip on the galaxy was tightening with each passing day, and if they didn't act now, there might not be a tomorrow. The planet loomed before them, a swirling mass of green and brown. Scans revealed a dense jungle covering most of the surface, with a few scattered ruins poking through the canopy. "Those ruins are our best bet," Zane said, pointing to a particularly large structure on the map. "The artifact is likely hidden somewhere inside." Hawkins nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Then that's where we'll start our search. The battle for the artifact." The landing party set down in a clearing a few clicks from the ruins, the humid air heavy with the scent of rotting vegetation. Hawkins led the way, his rifle at the ready, with Zane and a dozen of the Endeavor's best fighters following close behind. They had barely made it 100 meters into the jungle when all hell broke loose. Imperial soldiers, their armor painted a mottled green and brown to blend in with their surroundings, sprang from the underbrush, their weapons spitting deadly plasma bolts. Hawkins and his team dove for cover, returning fire as best they could. But the Imperials had the advantage of numbers and surprise, and they were ruthless in their assault. A desperate search. "Fall back," Hawkins yelled, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "We need to regroup." They fought their way back to the ruins, taking heavy losses along the way. By the time they reached the crumbling stone walls, only a handful of them remained. "We can't let them get the artifact," Zane said, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "We have to find it before they do." Hawkins nodded, his eyes hard. "Agreed. Split up and search the ruins. Stay in contact and watch your backs." They moved cautiously through the ancient halls, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay, and more than once Hawkins swore he saw something moving in the shadows, finding the artifact. It was Zane who found the artifact first, hidden away in a small chamber deep within the ruins. It was a small, unassuming thing, no bigger than a fist, but it seemed to pulse with an inner light. "This is it," Zane breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "The key to ending Zaren's reign of terror." But before they could celebrate their victory, a new wave of Imperial soldiers burst into the chamber, their weapons blazing. Hawkins and his team fought with everything they had, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The sacrifice, a desperate escape. In the chaos of the battle, Hawkins saw one of his men go down, a plasma bolt burning a hole through his chest. Another fell a moment later, his head snapped back by a sniper's shot. Hawkins gritted his teeth, his finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. He knew that they couldn't hold out much longer, but he refused to give up, not when they were so close. "Zane," he yelled, his voice hoarse with desperation. "Get the artifact out of here. We'll hold them off." Zane hesitated for a moment, his eyes meeting Hawkins. But then he nodded, tucking the artifact into his belt and sprinting for the exit. Hawkins and the remaining members of his team formed a defensive perimeter around the chamber, their weapons blazing as they cut down wave after wave of Imperial soldiers. But for every one they killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. A heroic stand. In the end, it was only Hawkins and a handful of his most loyal fighters who made it out alive. They staggered back to the Endeavor, their armor scorched and dented, their faces haggard with grief and exhaustion. But they had the artifact, and with it, a chance to turn the tide of the war. As the Endeavor limped back into space, Hawkins couldn't help but feel a sense of bitter victory. They had struck a blow against the Empire, but at a terrible cost. So many brave men and women had given their lives on Zephyr's Prime, and he knew that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Reflections and resolve. In his quarters, Hawkins sat hunched over his desk, his head in his hands. The weight of command had never felt so heavy, the burden of responsibility so crushing. But then he thought of his fallen comrades, of the countless beings across the galaxy who were counting on him to lead them to freedom, and he knew that he could not falter now, not when they were so close to victory. With a deep breath, Hawkins straightened his shoulders and stood tall. The Empire may have dealt them a heavy blow, but they were far from beaten. And with the artifact in their possession, they finally had a weapon that could match Zaren's might. A plan for victory. The road ahead would be long and hard, But Hawkins knew that he would not rest until the galaxy was free from the Emperor's tyranny. For his crew, for his allies, and for all those who had suffered under the Empire's brutal regime, he would fight on, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, on Thrax Prime, Emperor Zeron paced the halls of his palace, his face twisted with rage. The news of the humans' victory on Zephyrus Prime had reached him, and the knowledge that they now possessed the artifact filled him with a cold, seething fury. Zeron's fury. How could you let this happen? He snarled at his advisors, his eyes blazing with madness. I ordered you to crush the rebellion, and yet they continue to defy me at every turn. The advisors cowered before him, their faces pale with fear. They knew all too well the price of failure in Zeron's court. My lord, one of them stammered, his voice trembling, we have already dispatched our best troops to hunt down the humans and recover the artifact. They will not escape us this time. Total war. But Zeron was not satisfied. In his mind, the only way to ensure the rebels' defeat was to destroy them utterly, to wipe them from the face of the galaxy. Burn their worlds, he hissed, his voice cold and cruel. Slaughter their people. I want them to know the true power of the Empire before they die. The advisors bowed low, their faces etched with a mix of fear and reverence. They knew that to disobey Zeron's orders was to invite a fate worse than death. And so, across the galaxy, the Empire's ships began to move, their weapons primed and ready. Entire planets were reduced to rubble, their populations massacred without mercy. But even as the Empire tightened its grip, the rebellion continued to grow. More and more species flocked to Hawkins' banner, drawn by the promise of freedom and the chance to strike back at their oppressors, preparing for the final battle. And at the heart of it all, the artifact pulsed with an ancient, untamed power, waiting for the moment when it would be unleashed upon the stars. The final battle was coming, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. But Hawkins and his allies would not falter, would not yield. They would fight to the last, knowing that the price of failure was too high to bear. For in the end, it was not just their own lives they fought for, but the lives of every being in the galaxy. And that was a cause worth dying for. The final battle, gathering allies. The Endeavor's bridge buzzed with activity as Captain Hawkins and Zane reviewed the final plans for their assault on Thrax Prime. The artifact they had retrieved from Zephyrus Prime had proven to be more powerful than they had ever imagined. It was their last hope in their desperate struggle against the Galactic Empire. We've received word from several rebel factions, Zane said, pointing to a holographic map of the galaxy. They're ready to join us in the assault. With their help, we might just stand a chance.